two bags sitting side by side in a garage. Same nitrogen number on the front. One of them can turn a lawn the greenest on the street. The other can leave a third of it dead in about 4 days. Here's the part that catches almost everyone off guard. Fertilizer burn has nothing to do with heat. You can spread it on a cool, cloudy October morning and still walk out to pale, striped grass that matches your spreader path exactly. What's actually happening is that your grass is dying of thirst while standing in wet soil, surrounded by water it physically cannot reach. I got the clearest explanation of the actual mechanism from a soil scientist named Priya Ramaswamy, who spent over a decade doing fertility consulting for a regional turf and ornamental supplier outside Columbus, Ohio. She told me something that reframed how she explains burn to every client. Nobody's grass gets scorched, she said. It gets dehydrated by its own fertilizer. The word burn is honestly misleading, and it's cost people a lot of money over the years. Here's why. Fertilizer, chemically, is a salt. Urea, ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, potassium chloride. These are all crystalline compounds that break apart into charged particles the moment they dissolve in water, which is exactly the point since roots can only absorb dissolved nutrients, not solid granules. Every one of these compounds has what's called a salt index, a measure of how aggressively it raises the salt concentration of the surrounding water. Urea sits around 75. Ammonium sulfate lands near 69. Potassium chloride, the cheap potash found in a lot of budget blends, comes in around 116, actually higher than table salt on the same scale. Here's the mechanism that ties it all together. Plant roots don't have pumps to draw water in. Water moves into a root purely by osmosis, drifting from an area of low salt concentration toward an area of higher concentration. Inside a root cell, the sap is relatively concentrated. Out in the soil under normal conditions, the surrounding water is relatively clean, so water naturally flows inward, and the grass drinks without expending any energy at all. Dump a heavy dose of fast-dissolving fertilizer salt into that soil water, and you flip the gradient entirely. Suddenly, the soil solution is saltier than the inside of the root, and water, following nothing but basic physics, reverses direction and flows back out of the plant. This connects directly to the compaction and drainage concepts from our soil compaction video. Healthy roots depend on that soil-to-root water relationship working correctly in both directions. Fertilizer burn is essentially the same osmotic principle running in reverse. Botanists call what happens next plasmolysis, the cell membrane pulling away from the cell wall as the cell collapses inward, like a water balloon losing pressure. Root hairs, the tiny single-cell threads that do nearly all the actual water absorption, go first, since they're the thinnest and most directly exposed. That's fertilizer burn, not scorching, but dehydration happening from the inside, in soil that's fully moist the entire time. There's a second mechanism worth knowing about, and this one's a gas rather than a salt problem. When urea granules dissolve, they don't immediately become usable plant food. They have to be converted first by an enzyme called urease, which lives throughout soil, thatch, and decaying clippings. As urease splits the urea molecule, some of the nitrogen escapes as ammonia gas. If that fertilizer's been watered in properly, the ammonia forms down in the soil where moisture and clay particles capture it and convert it safely into forms the roots actually want. But if granules are sitting on dry thatch or stuck to damp grass blades on a warm morning, that ammonia releases right at the leaf surface, where it's caustic to the waxy cuticle that keeps a grass blade from losing water. Ohio State University Extension turf research notes that under warm, breezy conditions on high pH soil, surface-applied unwatered urea can lose somewhere in the range of 20 to 40% of its nitrogen to the atmosphere as ammonia gas, a real fraction of the bag doing nothing but damaging blades on its way out. This is exactly why water it in isn't a suggestion. It's the line between feeding the lawn and gassing it. Here's where it gets more interesting, because even when nothing visibly burns, quick-release fertilizer sets up a slower problem you won't notice for another 6 weeks. Walk out 3 days after a heavy dose of fast nitrogen, and the lawn looks fantastic, deep green, thick, growing fast. That's not success. That's the plant dumping its stored carbohydrate reserves into leaf tissue as fast as it can build it, because that's exactly what a nitrogen spike tells it to do. 3 things follow, and all of them cost you later. Root expansion stalls, since energy spent pushing top growth is energy not going toward roots. The new tissue that grows is softer. Rapid cell expansion under high nitrogen produces thinner cell walls and higher water content, which is more vulnerable to fungal disease and easier for chewing insects to feed on. And then quick-release nitrogen is largely gone from the root zone within 2 to 4 weeks, taken up, converted, volatilized as gas, or leached below the roots after a heavy rain, leaving the lawn with depleted reserves and a smaller root system than it started with. It looks tired, so the natural response is more fertilizer, and the cycle repeats with bigger swings, thinner roots, and more disease pressure each time. That's not really a knowledge problem, it's a product problem. Slow-release fertilizer solves this at the root cause by never letting soil salt concentrations spike in the first place. A granule releasing nitrogen over 8 to 12 weeks simply can't flood the root zone the way one dissolving in 90 seconds can. But slow release isn't a single technology, and knowing which kind you're holding tells you a lot about how it'll behave. Polymer-coated urea is the most sophisticated version, a urea granule wrapped in a thin resin shell with microscopic pores that water vapor moves through, dissolving the urea inside and letting it diffuse back out gradually. Diffusion speeds up as temperature rises, which happens to track grass growth almost perfectly, so the release curve naturally matches plant demand. Sulfur-coated urea is the older, cheaper version. Soil microbes and moisture gradually break down a molten sulfur coating, and because coating thickness varies slightly granule to granule, release happens at staggered times, giving you a spread-out feed, plus a bonus of sulfur many soils are short on. Methylene ureas and urea formaldehyde products link urea molecules into chains of varying length. Instead of coating them, short chains break down in weeks, long chains take months, and soil bacteria have to break the chains apart to free the nitrogen, which ties release to soil temperature and biological activity and essentially shuts it off in cold soil when grass isn't growing anyway. IBDU releases through a slow chemical reaction with water rather than relying on microbes, which makes it one of the few slow-release sources that still works in cool soil, and it's why you'll find it in late-fall dormant feeding products. Natural organics, feather meal, blood meal, bone meal, composted manure are the original slow release. Nitrogen locked inside proteins that soil microbes must digest before roots can use any of it. Entirely biological and nearly impossible to overdose into a burn. Every one of these shares the same underlying advantage. At any given moment, only a small fraction of the applied nitrogen is actually dissolved in soil water. The rest stays locked up, waiting its turn. Salt concentration never spikes high enough to reverse that osmotic flow. Priya was direct about how to think through choosing between these when you're standing in a garden center aisle looking at several bags that all say slow release on the front. Polymer-coated is the most predictable and precise, and generally the best fit if you want the release curve to reliably track plant demand across a wide temperature range, though it typically costs more per pound of nitrogen than the alternatives. Sulfur-coated is a reasonable middle ground, cheaper, with the sulfur bonus, but slightly less uniform in its release timing. The organic sources are the gentlest option and effectively impossible to burn with, but they're also the most temperature dependent, meaning they can sit almost inert in cold soil and then release faster than expected during an unexpected warm spell, which makes them a little less predictable for precise timing, even though they're the safest in terms of burn risk. Here's a genuinely simple demonstration that makes this real. Fill 2 clear drinking glasses with room temperature water. Drop a pinch of your fast-acting fertilizer into one, and a pinch of a coated slow-release product into the other. Come back in 5 minutes. The quick-release glass is already cloudy or clear again, the granules dissolved into solution. Check the slow-release glass at 30 minutes. At 2 hours, the next morning, the granules are still sitting there intact, holding their shape. Picture those 2 glasses as the water film around your grass roots. In one, the salt load arrived all at once. In the other, it's still arriving gradually, weeks out. There's a second useful check, 3 to 4 weeks after applying a coated product. Part the grass and look at the soil surface. You'll find granules that appear whole but feel light and hollow. Pinch one and it collapses, an empty shell, which is the polymer coating left behind once the nitrogen has fully diffused out. Finding those empty husks confirms the product worked exactly as intended. While you're down there, it's worth learning to distinguish fertilizer burn from everything else that damages a lawn, since they're often confused. Fertilizer burn shows up in geometric patterns, straight stripes, sharp turns, a rectangular scorched patch matching wherever the spreader paused. Disease produces irregular blobs and rings. Grub damage rolls up like loose carpet in a spreading pattern. Drought stress follows the shape of sun exposure and irrigation coverage. Fertilizer follows the shape of your walking route, and almost nothing in nature walks in straight lines. Damaged blades also turn tan or bleached from the tip downward, with an unusually sharp, hard-edged transition between healthy and damaged tissue rather than a gradual fade. There's a label trick almost nobody actually uses. Turn any fertilizer bag around to the guaranteed analysis and look underneath the total nitrogen number for a breakdown most people skip entirely. Terms like slowly available nitrogen, water-insoluble nitrogen, or coated slow-release urea, sometimes abbreviated WIN. Whatever percentage sits next to that line is the fraction of nitrogen that won't hit the root zone all at once. 30% or more listed as slowly available puts you in reasonable territory. 50% or better, and you're holding a product that's genuinely difficult to burn with. If there's no slow release line at all, just ammoniacal and urea nitrogen with nothing else listed, you're holding a fast release product, and every application caution applies double. A few practical rules that matter more than product choice alone. Rate causes more burn than anything else. The standard ceiling is 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per application. Cut to half a pound for a fast release product. To calculate this, divide the first number on the bag into 100 to find how many pounds of product deliver 1 pound of actual nitrogen. A 25-pound bag of 2406 fertilizer contains 6 pounds of actual nitrogen, covering 6,000 square feet at the full rate. Water it in within 24 hours, a quarter to half inch, which both carries granules off the leaf and down to soil where ammonia gets captured, and dilutes the soil solution before salt concentration climbs high enough to matter. Apply to dry grass rather than damp. Morning dew alone is enough to hold granules against the leaf surface where the worst damage happens. Split the application, running your spreader at half the intended rate in 2 perpendicular passes rather than 1 full pass, which turns overlap errors mild instead of doubled and eliminates most visible striping. And never fertilize a stressed or dormant lawn. If footprints stay visible for more than a minute after walking across it, or blades are folded and colors gone blue-gray, that plant already has a water problem, and adding salt on top of that is exactly the wrong move. Water thoroughly, wait a few days, then feed. A couple of additional habits Priya mentioned that cost nothing and quietly reduce burn risk further. Sweep any granules that land on driveways or sidewalks back onto the lawn rather than leaving them. Beyond the environmental concern of nutrients washing into storm drains, granules sitting on hot concrete concentrate and can blow back onto adjacent grass in a much more concentrated dose than intended. And get an actual soil test done periodically, since pH strongly controls nutrient availability. In soil that's too acidic or too alkaline, nutrients get chemically locked into forms roots simply can't absorb, which leads a lot of people to apply more and more fertilizer, chasing a result that a pH correction would have solved far more directly, all while raising their overall salt load in the process for no real benefit. Timing beats almost everything else you can control, and the calendar isn't actually the right guide. Soil temperature is. A basic probe thermometer or even a kitchen meat thermometer pushed 2 to 4 inches into the ground in the morning gives you the number that actually matters. For cool season grasses, the most valuable feeding of the entire year happens in early fall. Once soil temperature drops into the 50s and 60s, top growth slows, but roots keep expanding well into cold weather, so nitrogen applied in that window goes almost entirely into root and crown development rather than leaf growth. This is the application that determines how a lawn handles the following July, and it's the one most people skip simply because the lawn already looks fine at the time. Heavy spring nitrogen on cool season grass does the opposite, forcing lush top growth during exactly the weeks the plant should be building roots ahead of summer heat, handing you a shallow-rooted lawn right as conditions get hardest. For warm season grasses, the rule inverts. Wait until soil temperatures are consistently above 65 degrees and the lawn has fully greened up. Then feed through the active growing season, stopping roughly 6 weeks before the average first frost, so late season growth has time to harden off before cold weather arrives. If this changes how you read a fertilizer bag, hit subscribe. We're breaking down the actual science behind every product, one video at a time, no filler. Go watch our soil compaction video next for more on how water actually moves through and around your root zone. And if you're not sure whether your soil pH is locking up nutrients before fertilizer even has a chance to help, that's a 5-minute conversation with your county extension office worth having before your next application. Tell me in the comments, have you ever pulled back the grass and found those hollow, empty granule shells? Or noticed burn stripes that matched your spreader path a little too perfectly? I read every comment. See you in the next one.